In today's session, we are going to focus on the topic which is To the Lighthouse as an autobiographical novel. Um, Virginia Woolf, the writer, and how it is related to the characters and to the novel depiction of the novel. So, this is what we are going to analyze it. For this, it is very important to understand the background of Virginia Woolf. Virginia Woolf was earlier known as Virginia Stephen, and she was born in the year 1882. So it is important to understand about her background, especially her family. Also, when it is important to understand that when we talk about an autobiographical novel, it is actually a transformation of a lived experience into a fictional discourse. And it also involves more about the introspective perspective and how it geared towards self-analysis. So this is one important element of an autobiographical novel. And let's start with Virginia Woolf's family background. So Virginia Woolf was born in the year 1882 and she died in the year 1914. So she has a very short lifespan, but within this period, she is considered as one of the most important modernist 20th century author, and she is also a pioneer in the use of the narrative technique known as the stream of consciousness. Stream of consciousness is very evidently visible in two of her main novels, one To the Lighthouse, and another one is Mrs Dalloway. Virginia Woolf was married to a British man of letters and a publisher. He is known as Leonard Woolf, and that's how Virginia Stephen changed her name to Virginia Woolf after marriage. They met in the year 1904 and they got married in the year 1912. One of the most important inspiration of her life is Leslie Stephen, her father. She's greatly inspired by her father, and even in this novel To the Lighthouse, we can find that how she was greatly inspired, and she actually tries to portray her father through the portrayal of the character Mr. Ramsay in this particular novel. So this is what let's just try to find a relationship between these two characters because Leslie Stephen was a well-known intellectual man and he was 50 years of age when Virginia Woolf was born. And during his younger days, he was very active and he was good for mountaineer, good as known, greatly known as a mountaineer and also a magazine editor, an essayist, and a biographer, philosopher, and a historian of ideas. In short, he is a master of all arts. When we talk about Virginia Woolf's mother, Julia Stephen. So again, Julia Stephen and Mrs. Ramsay in the novel, again, we can find a very close relationship between these two because in short, we are trying to identify the characteristics of the novel, how all she tries to relate her personal background with that of the novel. That's what we are going to analyze in this particular lecture. So, Julia Stephen, Virginia Woolf's mother, was a very admired woman. Leslie Stephen was actually her second husband. Her first husband died at a very young age, and later Leslie Stephen proposed and they got married. And but Julia Stephen was um, a woman who represents the Victorian Milo because she is into the not into any of the professional training, but so she is a typical family woman, a homemaker, take care of the family, look after the husband and home, and so she is typically a Victorian character. But of course, she is also a woman who considers charity as her hobby because she likes to help people. She's very kind-hearted. She helped the poor and the sick people. So this actually was one of the most important characteristics of Julia Stephen. But as a Victorian middle class mother, we can find that she could not obtain any of the professional training. And mainly she was deeply committed to this charity work among the poor and the sick, which I have already mentioned. But because of all this, it's ocean. You know, this led to her sudden death in the year 1895. So this was really a shock for Virginia Woolf because Virginia was a 13-year-old girl when her mother passed away. You can find in this novel also Mrs. Ramsay in the second half of the novel. She also died. So that is another relation or connection between the text and the personal author's personal background. So when we come back to this particular text, let's leave Virginia Woolf's family, especially her father and her mother. They are the models for this novel, which is Virginia Woolf's To the Lighthouse. In the name of they are portrayed here as Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay, and it's the story of Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay's family. So it is important to understand, like the novel. In the novel, we know that it's a very big family because Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay, they had 8 children, both boys and girls. So likewise in Virginia Woolf's family also consisted of her parents and her sister, her 2 brothers, and 3 children from her mother, the first marriage, from her first marriage, and also a mentally handicapped child from father's marriage, and also a numerous servants, visitors and guests are also part of this family. So in this particular novel, To the Lighthouse, also can find Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay with 8 children, and also so many other guests like Charles Stanley, Lily Briscoe, William Banks, and many other characters. So this way also you can find more connection with that of the text and the author's own family life. But Virginia Woolf was greatly haunted by the memory of her parents, especially with the death of her mother and later by her father. So until 19, because this novel was written around 1925, and she was a 43-year-old girl at that point of time, and she was going through a completely distressed life. She with a devastating emotions and a complete stress, and you can find in this novel also it actually focuses on the psychological state more than the structure of the story, because the stream of consciousness is a technique that is used to measure the psychological state of mind, which in other ways the stream of consciousness actually focus on the indirect interior monologue. So Virginia herself was going through a psychological state where she was completely devastated and shattered by the death of her parents and also the death of many other members in her family, like her brothers and sisters. So many of the series of deaths that took place in her family also was one of the reason why she focused mainly on the psychological state and the trauma of the characters in this particular novel. And it is also important to understand that the main character, one of the main character, we can see that Lily Briscoe, her painting and her artistic skills, actually it also symbolizes Virginia Woolf's psychological state. In short, I can say at this point that this is a novel. Uh, we can also find Virginia Woolf as a character, but she very brilliantly portrayed it in fragmented identities. Like we cannot see one character, we cannot point it out in one character, but instead Cam Ramsey, who is a 7-year-old child, because that also represent the Cam Ramsey also represents Virginia Woolf's one of her fragmented identity, because he was just a 7-year-old child, and Virginia was 7 when at this time. So you can find Cam Ramsey in this particular novel, and also we can find James Ramsey, which is again very closely related to Mrs. Ramsey in this novel, and also Lily Briscoe, who is very close related to Mrs. Ramsey. So this way, these 3 characters like Cam Ramsey, James Ramsey, Lily Briscoe, who are very close to Mrs. Ramsey, which actually shows that these 3 fragmented identities represented Virginia Woolf in this particular perspective. Um, so it is also important to understand that this Lily Briscoe is a character who is significant, who celebrated the artistic skill in this particular perspective. But after the death of Virginia Woolf, let's come back to Virginia Woolf. After the death of Virginia Woolf's father, Leslie Stephen, all the sisters, I mean the sisters, they moved away from Kensington and they settled in London. And there they formed a group known as the Bloomsbury Group. And as a result of this group, they are much more exposed to the society and the liberal minded, become liberal minded, modern in outlook. All this influenced them, and also it helped them to develop a network of friends from the various disciplines or fields of art and literature. Like some friends are from the critics, biographer, philosopher, even artists, painters. So in this text also you can find these visitors who represent, who are entering into the family or trying to join with this family. They are all from different family, different disciplines or different fields of art, like William Banks, a biographer. Then we have Lily Briscoe, the artist, Charles Stanley. So this way we can also identify these various disciplines in one portrayed under one novel. There we can find a relationship between the portrayal of her personal life or her life into this novel. But yes, of course, Virginia Woolf tries to distance herself from the text a lot. But her fragmented identities was represented through the characters like Cameron, James, and Lily Briscoe. Mm, so this is one important element which we need to understand. And now let's move to the next element, which is the ambivalent relationship with Leslie Stephen. Because of, as a father, he was very greatly inspired by his skill, his individuality. But uh, why it is an ambivalent relation? We know it's ambivalent means it creates a very puzzling and a confused relationship in this. Um, in this particular situation, we can find that her father encouraged her because on one side he is a man of who believes in traditional outlook. On the other, he is a unorthodox. Or on one side, he is he is an orthodox. Another one, he is a very liberal-minded person. So that is what the main reason to use this term ambivalence in this particular context, because she respected him and identified him as a great writer. But when it comes to his family, we can find that he sent his boys for formal training and didn't give formal education to Virginia Woolf. But on the other hand, he is the one who realized that she is a very talented girl with who likes to educate and who has a taste for reading and writing. So he realized this, and he is the one who encouraged her and lent her books and also gave her books from his own library. So he took her very seriously and also conversed with her about her taste, to know more about her taste and in reading and writing. And so he is the one who actually encouraged her to become a writer. So this is one important inspiration, and that's why she considered him as a role model. But on the other hand, he is a victim to the patriarchal society because he always want to dominate as and also represents also a very demanding character in front of his wife and especially in front of daughters. But after Julia Stephen's death, there is a drastic change in his character. He becomes a bullied character. But for Virginia Woolf, she saw him as an unhappy man because he is intellectual and no, he himself believed that he is very genius. But he is always an unhappy man because he's a character who has so much of dreams which he could not attempt. He could not. achieve it in his lifetime. So he mostly considers himself as a failed um, character. So Virginia Woolf consider him as a role model, but at the same time, she knows that he failed in most of his attempts as well. But she respected this her father, and that's why she start while writing this novel. She wanted to portray Mr. Ramsay completely like her father figure. But as the story unfolds, she finds that Mrs. Ramsay also similar to her own mother's identity. So that's how Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay is very closely related to her own father and mother. But later, then when she develop other characters, it very naturally she portrayed all her family members. But instead, she very consciously distanced herself from the text. Is one important element in this particular perspective. Now, when we say this novel, To the Lighthouse, is an autobiographical novel, we are trying to establish it because how are these evidences? Because in order to establish this argument, it is important to get the evidence for it. So the evidences can clearly be seen in the writings, especially through the diaries which she has written, and also a number of letters and memoirs. And soon after her death, these letters and memoirs were collected and published in a voluminous work known as the Moments of Being. So this is the evidence to prove that this To the Lighthouse, this novel To the Lighthouse, is an autobiographical novel. In addition to this, there is an essay which clearly mentioned a lot of reflection about her own family and her own family background. And this is clearly seen in one of her essay, which is called A Sketch of the Past. So this is mostly talks about her autobiographical novel, but this it's important to understand that there is a quote in A Sketch of the Past which says that until I was in the 40s, the presence of my mother obsessed me. I could hear her voice, see her, imagine what she would do or say as I went about my days doing. So that attraction towards a mother, her love and care towards a mother is very clearly seen in these lines, and this actually haunted her for years and years, and that's how she decided to write this novel To the Lighthouse, which gives emphasis to the character Mrs. Ramsay in this particular novel. Um, Besides this, when we talk about this novel, To the Lighthouse, this novel tries to negotiate her relations with her parents and also herself and also the environmental. Because when we say the environmental, because this novel is starts with a family gathering, with a in a picnic mood, in a holiday mood, where everyone gathered together in one place where they are, planning uh, for the destination to reach the destination, that means to the lighthouse. So in this section it is also even this holidaying is also similar to that of what she usually experienced during her childhood days, which never brought to the lighthouse based on her childhood memories of at Torrent House on the coast of Cornwall, where the Stephen family used to spend their summers. Although Mr. and Mrs. Ramsay were portrayed very close to the actual parents, but it is important to understand that it has so many other themes in this particular novel, right? So, To the Lighthouse is not completely about Virginia Woolf's childhood days, but you can find so much of elements and characteristics in the portrayal of these characters. But some of the most important themes which are highlighted in this particular novel, which includes like life and death, the passage of time, the creation of art, through the portrayal of the character Lily Briscoe, and also we know that on the background, the World War I was going on, so that order and chaos as a result of it, and also we can find the opposite characters like Lily Briscoe and William Banks, but William Banks very secretly fell in love with Mrs. Ramsay. So these kind of opposite characters or the triangle love story is also a part of it. Also, we can find the bonding between the people or the relationship that was given more emphasis in the story, because not just a family, it's not just a completely family story, because we have external guests like Libby Briscoe, William Banks, and all this number of other guests joined in this particular novel. So that way it actually talks about the bonding of the relationship, not just between the children and the parents, but it also talks a lot more about it. And also it talks about the transformation of the self, and also the transience of life are some of the most important highlights in this particular novel. So in short, we can very clearly conclude by establishing the facts with the help of these arguments and evidences. We can clearly conclude that this novel, To the Lighthouse, written by Virginia Woolf, is an autobiographical piece of art. In the next session, we'll talk more about the stream of consciousness.